Hey, pues bueno, bienvenidos, bienvenidas a este Dinner and Learn del día de hoy. Hoy vamos a tener una invitada muy especial y primero les quiero hablar un poquito de la Asociación de Emprendedores. ¿Cuál es nuestra misión? Nuestra misión es que somos una organización sin fines de lucro 501 con la misión de educar, motivar, empoderar y desarrollar las habilidades de liderazgo de negocios en los emprendedores y microempresarios de habla hispana en los Estados Unidos, logrando de esta forma su integración en el desarrollo económico de sus ciudades, condados y estados respectivamente. Nuestros valores es armonía, balance, responsabilidad, integridad y respeto. Que las primeras letras de estos valores forman la palabra abrir, lo cual significa abrirse a nuevas oportunidades, abrirse a nuevos conocimientos, abrirse a cuando las cosas no están yendo bien, ver de otras posibilidades de volver a empezar. Es básicamente abrirse a conocer nuevas personas, hacer conexión de redes, y eso es a lo que se refiere. Nuestra mesa directiva está constituida principalmente por Mónica Robles, que es la fundadora y presidenta, Ana Bradfield, que es tesorera, Brenda Walters, que es secretaria. También nuestra mesa directiva en el condado de Riverside está Jonathan Escobar, también Sayuri Katsurayama del condado de Riverside, Vilma Brager, también del condado de Riverside. Estos son algunos de nuestros afiliados, patrocinadores y ciudades donde nosotros tenemos presencia. Estamos con Silver Lining, SBDC, NSBA, IECF. También tenemos presencia en Corona, Anaheim, Indio, Santana, Pico Rivera, Bellflower, Riverside, entre otras más. Y también estos son nuestros patrocinadores. Ahorita vamos a hacer la conexión de redes. Voy a quitar un poquito la presentación para dejar de compartir, para que ustedes se puedan presentar. Roxana, bueno, al contrario, primero voy a empezar yo para que después ustedes lo puedan hacer. Mi nombre es Daniel Gauman, yo soy consultor financiero de negocios con la Asociación de Emprendedores y estoy aquí para apoyarlos a todos ustedes a hacer la administración y que tengan acceso a capital. Me pueden contactar a danielgauman@asociaciondeemprendedores.org. Entonces, ahora sí, Roxana, ¿te puedes presentar tú también?
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Roxana Cortés, soy eh, dueña propietaria de Todo Eventos, dedicado al arte, diseño y decoración con globos, flores y telas. Estoy en el área de Orange County, en Mission Viejo. Me pueden contactar por Facebook de Todo Eventos. Igual con mi número de teléfono, el 949-531-5629. Y estamos para servirles en diferentes eventos sociales, familiares, ONGs o cualquier tipo de evento que ustedes soliciten en la parte de decoración. Un gusto y buenas tardes.
Perfecto, muchas gracias, Roxana. Y también los invito a todos que pongan su información en el chat, nombre, correo, teléfono, para que también la gente los pueda contactar. Astrid, si me haces el favor de presentarte tú también, dar tu diálogo de elevador.
Claro que sí, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Astrid Crafted Creation. Ayudamos a empresas, ONGs y particulares con la elaboración y la personalización de todo tipo de artículos para promover sus marcas, servicios, productos o eventos especiales. Nuestros servicios abarcan el área digital, física e impresión 3D. Me pueden contactar al 909-969-8584. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Rocío, Rocío, te pido pongas tu cámara. Ah, ahí está.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Rocío Villanueva. Soy la dueña de Villanueva Family Childcare en la ciudad de Yucaipa. Estamos certificados en CPR. Proveemos 2 comidas, 2 bocadillos, con currículo adaptado a los niños, abierto de lunes a viernes de 6 de la mañana a 6 de la tarde con horarios flexibles. Y para niños de 0 a 13 años. Si quieren contactarme o quieren una cita para visitar mi hogar o mi número de teléfono es 909-492-3148.
Muchas gracias, Rocío. Arturo, Arturo, ¿estás ahí? Para que nos des tu diálogo del elevador. Ok. Blanca. Ah, dime, Arturo, ya vi que abriste el micrófono. Dime.
Sí, buenas noches. Mira, es la primera vez que estoy con ustedes.
Ujú.
y nada más quiero escuchar qué es lo que se trata toda esta asociación. Mi esposa es la que me invitó en realidad.
Claro, si tienes
Pero,
un negocio, preséntate y también que digas dónde te pueden contactar, más que nada es con corrección de redes. Adelante.
ok, mira, mi nombre es Arturo Ordaz, me dedico a programación de ciencia. Quiero abrir una compañía sobre ese tipo de evento que quiero hacer. Y mi teléfono es el 714-676-6201.
Perfecto, muchas gracias, Arturo. Blanca, Blanca, ¿estás ahí? Si no, ahorita regreso contigo. Minerva, ¿crees que te puedas presentar? Es el diálogo de elevador. Que te presentes, qué es lo que haces y dónde te pueden contactar.
Hola, yo soy Minerva Padilla. Yo lo que hago es doy cursos de cómo hablar en público y de neuroventas. Me pueden contactar en mis redes sociales, en todas estoy como Minerva Padilla, en Instagram, en TikTok y en mi website. Muchas gracias.
Súper, muchas gracias, Minerva. Y de nuevo les recuerdo, por favor, pongan su información en el chat también para que los demás podamos tener ese contacto. Blanca, ¿estás ahí o nos
Sí,
pasamos a
aquí
otra?
estoy, aquí estoy.
Adelante.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Blanca Méndez. Soy maquillista profesional, en peinado y maquilladora. Pueden contactarme a mi teléfono 714-310-6459 o en mis redes sociales como Blanca Makeup Hair Studio. Gracias.
A ti, Blanca, muchísimas gracias. Ok, ahora sí, vamos a continuar. Si alguien me faltó, me avisa. Bueno, esa fue nuestra conexión de redes. Ahora quiero presentarles a nuestra invitada especial. Nuestra invitada especial es Megan Gordon. Ella es gerente de Participación Empresarial y Asociaciones. Megan Gordon se desempeña como gerente de compromiso empresarial y alianzas externas en Project Equity. Aporta una amplia experiencia en el fomento del crecimiento y desarrollo de las pequeñas empresas en diversos sectores, como alimentos, hospitalidad, biotecnología y espacios de trabajo compartido. Con una carrera que abarca distintas industrias, ha ocupado roles en ventas de mercadotecnia y atención al cliente, ofreciendo una perspectiva integral valiosa para los propietarios de pequeñas empresas que exploran la transición hacia modelos de propiedad de empleados. En Project Equity, Megan colabora con distintos departamentos para promover la propiedad de empleados a nivel nacional. Ahorita le voy a pasar el micrófono a Megan. Lo más le quiero decir, si alguien tiene alguna pregunta, por favor pongan en el chat y al final se las voy a preguntar para que ella para que se las pueda contestar. Y nada, ahorita le doy el micrófono a Megan. Megan, you can go ahead and start your presentation.
Daniel, thank you so much. And good evening, everyone. Apologies for being the only one here speaking English, but hopefully the translation will work. And I'm really honored to be with you tonight. Tonight, we're going to talk about employee ownership, which may be a new concept for some folks here. And I'm really excited to talk you through what employee ownership is and how it might benefit your business. Next slide, please, Daniel. So I am with Project Equity, as Daniel said. We are a nationwide nonprofit that helps small businesses explore employee ownership. We are based in Oakland, California, but we work nationwide, and we have a concentration of work in Southern California, where I know many of you folks are. In addition to helping businesses through the transition, we also provide financing, and we work to advance employee ownership across economic development sectors, as well as throughout government agencies, and to forward adoption in the United States in general. Next slide, please. So how does employee ownership help us build stronger economies? And more importantly, what is it? Moving to the next slide, please. So employee ownership is a way for business owners to share both responsibilities and wealth with the workers who've helped you build your business. The benefits of employee ownership can include lower turnover for your staff, greater financial stability for your business, and they are a way for you to sell your business in whole or in part at a market rate while helping your employees build generational wealth through an ownership stake. Next slide, please. So why are we talking about employee ownership right now? What's unique about this time? Next slide. So we have something happening in the United States that we call the silver tsunami. And what this is that about half of small business owners across the United States are almost at the age where they're ready to retire. And if they don't have an alternative presented to them, many of these businesses will either close down or they will be bought by an out-of-town competitor, someone who doesn't have roots in the community and won't continue to reinvest where that business was grown and where that business has thrived so far. Next slide, please. So here you can see a graphic. This is pulled from our website, and you can actually go to our website using the little code at the bottom there if you'd like to take a look into your specific area of California. But these are the industries that represent most of the business within California, the sectors of business. So you may see your own company, the type of work you do, represented in these industries. And like I said earlier, about 50% of the businesses in California are owned by people who are 55 or over. So we view that as folks who are at least beginning to think about their retirement. Next slide, please. So there are a couple of challenges that face small businesses. And one of those is trying to retain your workers and support your productivity. So businesses are looking for ways to both recruit new employees, retain the employees you have, and reward the employees that you have. And employee ownership is a way to retain those quality jobs and reward those employees by giving them a stake of shared ownership within the company, within your company that they're working for. Next slide, please. So one of the challenges that faces a lot of United States workers is that they are economically insecure. They are unable to build assets. They don't see opportunities to build wealth. And building generational wealth is one of the key ways that we know that you can increase the likelihood that the next generation, the generation that comes after you, your children or your children's children, will have access to opportunities and capital. And we believe that it's important to provide that access to the frontline workers, the workers who are on the line every day doing the front facing, maybe they're customer facing, maybe if you run a restaurant, they're your servers, maybe if you run a retail location, they're your cashiers in the front or your stockers in the back. And a lot of times we see that those frontline workers tend to be workers from marginalized communities, workers from communities of color. And so we want to address that economic insecurity we see by providing a pathway forward through employee ownership. Next slide, please. So employee ownership is a win for local economies, and there's a couple ways that that's the case. Next slide. So the first win is how it helps you, owners. You guys are the emprendedores here. You are the owners of these small businesses. As we mentioned, only over half of these business owners are 55 or older, maybe thinking about retiring. When you think about retiring, there are a couple ways to think about that. A lot of people think about transitioning their business within their family, passing it down to your children, maybe a niece or a nephew. But what we've seen in the data is that only about 30% of businesses transition within families. And when you hear a statistic like that, it can sound bad. I like to see it as you've done such a good job that maybe your kids want to do something else. Maybe because of the small business that you created and the opportunities you created for your children through that income that you generated, maybe you sent them to college. Maybe they've become a doctor or a lawyer and they don't necessarily want to carry on the family business. Whatever the reason, we're seeing lower numbers of transitions within families. And when you go to put your business on the open market, only about 20% of small businesses that are put out listed for sale sell. And so when you add those numbers together and you look at 30% smaller, 30% transition within families, 20% going up for selling on the open market, you're really only looking at about 50% of small businesses finding that successful buyer that they want. So that's where we like to bring employee ownership into the conversation. Next slide, please. So the next is also with the selling owners. We see 4 main drivers for small business owners of things that they're looking to achieve with their business. One is they want to preserve their legacy. You've worked hard to build the business that you run, and you want that business to succeed beyond you. You'd like to see it rooted in the community you built it in, serving the people that, your clients, your customers. And so that legacy piece is important. Of course, you want to preserve a market value. You've worked hard and you deserve to be paid fairly for the business you created. So that's a very important driving factor too. And we would never ask anyone to sell their business at a discount in order to become an employee-owned business. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get down the slides. But it's important to know you are going to be getting a fair market value. Tax benefits, that's always important. We want to think about our taxes, and it's not the case that every form of employee ownership and every business can benefit from the tax benefits, but there are many ways that tax benefits can be achieved through an employee ownership buyout. And we can talk you through the specifics of what that might mean for the form of employee ownership you're looking at in conjunction with a tax attorney if we get to that stage. And then finally, retaining your employees. Most small business owners I know care a lot about the people that helped them get to where they are today, the people that have worked with you, that have been there with you, the blood, sweat, tears that we put into running a business every day. Those folks, we want to make sure that they're well taken care of too. And so when you look down the different options of what you could do, sell to your family member, sell to an outside party, or shut down your operations, really the only option that checks all the boxes across the matrix is the employee ownership option. And that's something we'd like to see everyone at least consider. Next slide, please. So employee ownership is also good for businesses. These stats come from the National Center for Employee Ownership and the Democracy at Work Institute. Those are 2 great groups that we work with in the space. We see higher profit margins in employee-owned businesses, 8.5% higher than their industry peers. And we see sales and employment growing at generally about 2% faster per year in employee-owned businesses. And there are a couple reasons for this. The main one, though, is when you see employees with stake in the game who feel that they can move the needle of what happens with your business and drive the profit margins that then benefit them directly, there's more incentive to do that work, and there's more incentive to drive those sales numbers. So by giving your employees a true stake in the business, you incentivize them to help you make that business grow, make that business bloom. Next slide, please. For similar reasons, we see lower turnover in employee-owned businesses. People who are working for businesses that they have a stake in generally have about 46% longer job tenure than their peers, so they're staying with their companies longer, and they have higher productivity. And those numbers, again, go back to when people feel incentivized, when people feel empowered, they're going to work harder and they're going to get more creative and see ways that they can move the needle, bring the bottom line up, and cause that business to perform at a higher level than it was performing perhaps previously. Next slide. So all that translates to a couple of different things. It translates to higher wages, it translates to longer job tenure, and it translates to higher household net worth. And that's a really big number we like to look at. That is not just the individual employee, but the overall wealth that's now affecting their family and allowing them to have ability to save, ability to think about putting away for things like college for their kids or buying their home. That household net worth is a really important metric to the workers in your workforce. And next slide, please. The final area where we see wins for employee ownership is in your economy in general. So we see that employee ownership builds more resilient local economies. It's going to reduce racial wealth gaps. Workers of color in employee-owned companies generally have more wealth than their peers. That leads to increased financial stability, higher job retention, and it's also going to lead to increased assets and economic mobility. So when you have, as we discussed on that previous slide, higher household net worth, you have probably higher retirement savings. So employee-owned companies were showing in the 200,000s in retirement savings compared to only in the 20s of thousands median for the average worker not working in an employee-owned company. So we're talking about really important numbers and numbers that really move the needle for your employee base. So that's the why. Let's go to the next slide and talk a little bit about how it works. How do we do this? It sounds great. How does it work? Next slide, please. So here you'll see the three main forms of employee ownership. And these three forms are what's known as an ESOP, or an employee stock ownership plan. This may be one folks have heard of. When I talk about employee ownership, this tends to be the form people are familiar with most. And an ESOP is basically a retirement plan that owns all or part of the company on behalf of the employees. So you can kind of think about it as analogous to a 401k, but happening in an employee-owned form as opposed to just a retirement fund. The next form of employee ownership, sort of the next most common or most known, is the worker cooperative. So a worker cooperative is wholly owned by the employee owners. They are going to have the right to share in profit, and they're going to have the right to direct representation through voting to elect and serve potentially on the board of directors that's going to govern that new employee-owned entity as the business moves forward. And the third form of employee ownership, and this form historically has not been particularly well known, but is becoming increasingly more utilized here in the United States, is what's called an employee ownership trust. And the EOT is a very customizable form of employee ownership. It can be adopted to incorporate some of the democratic principles that we talk about in the worker cooperatives, but it does have that component of profit sharing. It is a trust form of governance, and the trust that's created in an EOT is existing to benefit the employees of the business. Next slide, please. So what is a transition? What do we mean when we say we're going to move a company into employee ownership? So it's a sale. So we're selling the business, its assets or its stock, into a new entity that has employee owners. And there are a couple of ways to finance this sale. So the sale, the beneficiary of the sale is going to be the selling owner. The person who currently owns the business is the one who is going to be getting paid out. And it's financed by a loan that's taken out on the business and then repaid through future profits over time. I like to sort of describe this as the business is taking out a loan to buy itself. So the business is going to be transitioned, but you're going to be able to retain your executives, your management. If you have hierarchies in place, that work and management that works, you can keep that all in place. But in most cases, we are going to add in a layer, which is a board of directors, which may be comprised of some of the employee owners acting and sitting on that board as well. The founding owner, if you're the one who created this business, have a lot of flexibility as to what you want to do here. Some owners are ready to get out. They're ready to retire and they want to go, and that's fine. We'll figure out what we need to do to replace them operationally. But some owners aren't ready. Some owners, they'd like to reward their employees. They would like to take on a component of employee ownership to their business, but they're not ready to go anywhere yet, and that's fine too. So one of the great flexibilities of an employee ownership transition, and something that is not necessarily afforded to you in any of the other forms of transitioning a business, external sales, transferring to family, you don't always get to pace your own exit and decide how you want to structure it. And employee ownership lets you do that because you're really kind of in the driver's seat in terms of establishing what your new company looks like, how that's going to be formed, what your governance is going to look like, what your bylaws are going to look like, and what your personal timeline is going to look like as well. So that's a nice component for small businesses that are interested in exploring this option. Next slide, please. So how do we do this? What does Project Equity do to help you guys with this? So we work in a couple of different forms. And the first step is what we call the exploration step. This is, do you want to learn about employee ownership? Are you curious to understand how it might apply to your business? Exploration is a completely free step. This is a step where you can get on a call with me or with a member of my team, and you can ask your questions. You can tell me about your business. You can explain to me what your goals are around what you're hoping to achieve. And we'll talk through what your options might be, which forms of employee ownership might work for you, and what your next steps would be to move along that process. During the exploration phase, we will do some light financial analysis. We're not doing any deep analysis of your business, but we are going to be taking a look at your general profitability for the past 5 years or so. We're going to be taking a look at, what the trends are in terms of how your business is doing. Have you been doing great? You had maybe one down year, but things are back on the upswing. And that's all because everything that we do is going to be, going back to my point, we're going to take that loan out to help your business buy itself. So we want to make sure that your business is in strong financial health in order to be able to bear that placement of debt. So we don't want to take you to a point where you're paying us anything to do work before we understand what the financial footing of your business is now. So the next step, you can move to step 2, Daniel, is our feasibility study. And feasibility is a 3 to 4 month process. We're going to get really deep into due diligence on this stage. And what we're doing here, at this point, you would move from speaking to me or members of my team, and you would start speaking to our client services team. And they are going to do a lot of work to understand your business, all the components of your business. They want to understand your future profitability, what that might look like. So they're going to do modeling, financial modeling, to understand where your business is going and what those different potential future profits might look like for your business. They're going to look at your current debt and your debt capacity, how much potentially could be brought to the business to get you that fair sale price while not overburdening the business in the process. And they're going to look at your management structures. They're going to talk to you about your goals, you know, to my point earlier about, are you leaving? Are you staying? Do you have a timeline? All of that is going to get discussed during the feasibility study, and we're also going to help you understand which form of employee ownership might be the right fit for your specific business. At the end of the feasibility study, you're going to get a report back. It's going to tell you everything we found, all the work we've done, and it's also going to have a few different possible ways that we think we might be able to your specific business's transition. In addition to being a technical services provider, which Project Equity is, we are also, we have an impact investing fund. So we have the ability to bring capital to transactions. We're not always funding the whole transaction ourselves, but we know everyone in the space, or many people in the space. And so we're able to actually build different ways that we think we could actually get to the sale price that makes sense for you. So we're going to be looking at all of that during the feasibility study. If you decide, yeah, actually this seems right, I am excited to potentially bring my employees into the ownership space, we can take you through a full transition. And the transition is going to take anywhere from maybe 6 to 8 months to complete. During that process, we are going to establish your governance rules, establish your guidelines for your business, the bylaws for your business. We'll establish the board if appropriate, or a trust committee if it's the employee ownership trust form that you're going forward with. We'll bring all the capital together. We'll bring your employees in at this point. We'll help them understand what their responsibilities will be as worker owners. We'll also help them understand what their rights will be. And we'll do a lot of enablement work to make sure that everybody's on board and everybody understands how this business is going to run moving forward. We will then close the loop, dot the I's and cross the T's. But once the business has been sold and you've had, as the owner, that liquidity event, you've received your payout, your initial payout price for your business, we have a final step available where we can actually stay embedded with your company for another 1 to 2 years. We call this our Thrive program. And Thrive is where we help new employee-owned businesses become their best selves, live into being employee-owned, learn how to run a board meeting, learn how to have, you know, the conversations around your quarterly reports and what should be in them, and how does the profit sharing work, and I want to run for the board, but I'm not sure how that works. All of those different components of how to be employee-owned are the work that we'll sort of walk alongside you with in that final step of our engagement. So that's kind of, roughly speaking, the stages of how we work. If we move to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about readiness factors and what those might look like. So generally, we want to see 12 or more employees in order for us to bring a business through transition. One caveat to that is that for the ESOP model, we do want to see a larger company. Those generally are a bit more expensive to set up. They're a bit more expensive to maintain. And so generally we want to see 40 plus employees for an ESOP. We want to see a profitable company. So we want to see a company that's been in good financial health for at least the past 5 years. Again, you can have a down year here or there. We just don't want to see any strong downward trends, and we don't want to see more than, say, 2 years of unprofitability out of those 5. We do want to see businesses with an established track record. So, several years of operational experience. And finally, we are looking for minimal debt on the books because that'll help us support that transition and transaction process. All right, so we have next slide here. These are participatory, so you guys can feel free to jump in and answer. So the first question is, selling to employees requires accepting a lower selling price. Do you guys think that's true or false? And you can put your answers in the chat, or you can, okay, we can go ahead. That one is, you can select the next slide, it's false. So selling to your employees does not necessarily mean taking a lower price than a fair market price. It is going to be established based on your debt capacity, just like any bank finance sale to an individual. Next question. All right, so are all of your employees going to have to buy your business, pay out of pocket? And the answer here is also no. We are going to use that debt that we brought to the business to buy the business from you. So your employees are not obligated to finance the transaction. They're able to benefit, but because we're using the profitability of the business in order to enact the sale, they just get the benefits of it while you get the fair price. Next question. Will all of the business employees be managing the business equally? And this one is also false. You can keep those management structures in place that already exist. Like I said, you may need to make some strategic shifts if you are exiting your business, but it's not suddenly everyone has equal responsibilities, everyone has to do all the same things. The things that have made your business work and run now, we want to keep those working and running in the future. And last question. Selling owners can remain involved strategically in the business after the transition. And this one is true. You can stay involved. You can pace your exit based on your own choices of how you'd like to leave the business or not. And there's a lot of flexibility there built in. All right, so let's roll into a couple of case studies here. So if you can go to the slide for Proof Bakery. So Proof Bakery, this is a wonderful bakery. They're in Los Angeles. They transitioned into a worker cooperative. They were founded in 2010. They became employee owned in 2021. They have 25 employees. And you can see that quote there from Jen, who is one of the employee owners, just talking about what being a worker owner means to her. All right, next slide is Resource Development Associates. This is a small mission-driven consulting firm. They are based in Oakland, California, and they have become an employee ownership trust. They were founded in 1984. They transitioned in 2022. They have 30 employees, and they are working to address barriers to organizational, individual, and community well-being, and they thought it was important to treat their employees with the same sort of respect that they were treating the community around them. So you can see a nice quote there from Amalia, who is their CEO. And then the final case study we have here is Happy Earth Cleaning. Happy Earth is a cleaning company. They are from Minneapolis, Minnesota. They were founded in 2010, and they actually began their transition in 2019. So I'm sure a lot of us remember 2019 and how that was a fairly challenging year because that was, of course, rolling into 2020 and what we had happen in 2020. So as you might imagine, a cleaning company in 2020 all of a sudden was facing a real challenge, which is they weren't allowed to go in anybody's houses anymore. And that could have been a situation where a company could shut down. But they had already decided to become employee owned. They had committed to making this process work. And they all got together and they put their heads together and they figured out a solution. And what they did during the pandemic was they pivoted to creating cleaning kits with instructions. And they contacted all their customers, all the people whose houses they couldn't go into. And they said, hey, you still want a clean house? We still want to support you. And they were able to keep themselves afloat. And that's the kind of resilience that we tend to see in employee-owned companies. Maybe if it had been one owner, they might have just decided to let those people go because it might have been easier to do that. And instead they banded together and they're still, they're now able to clean people's houses in person again, but they have the other component to their business as well. I like to highlight them because they do bring some of that real show of what you get when you invest in your employees and what they're able to bring back into your business in terms of the creativity and the passion that they show. So those are my case studies. How can you guys learn more if you're interested in learning more about this? And if we go to the next slide here. So this is, we have a contact us page. You can go on our website, but we wanted to make sure, as I'm sure has been obvious, that Spanish is not my primary language. And so it might be a little challenging for you guys to just book a consult directly with me. The wonderful folks at Asociacion have agreed to work with us. So if you are interested in talking about employee ownership for your business, we would recommend you reach out directly to them and they will be able to help set up a call where we'll have a translator available so that you will be able to ask your questions in Spanish without having to hear my terrible Spanish. I promise I have a little bit of it and it's very bad. But that way we can facilitate that conversation for you. I would also say, if you were listening to this presentation and you saw the readiness factors and you said, I'm too small for that, I'm not ready, that's not where my business is yet, that's okay. The exploration process for employee ownership can happen early, and the more time you spend thinking about this, even if you're not ready to think about succession planning or you're not ready to think about wanting to bring these options into your business yet, but you'd like to learn what might help you get on the right path, we're happy to have those conversations too. So you don't need to be ready for a feasibility study. You don't need to be ready for a transition. If you would just like to talk about your business, explain your goals, and kind of understand what could help get you on a path forward, I would be happy to have those conversations too. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you do have any questions like that. And speaking of questions, I would love to open it up for any questions that we might have here.
Thank you so much, Megan. ¿Alguien tiene alguna pregunta que quiera hacer? La puede decir en el chat o puede abrir el chat y yo traduzco. ¿Alguien quiere aprovechar la experta Megan que tenemos aquí? Rocío, adelante.
Hola, no sé si esta funciona para ella, pero ¿qué tal si somos pequeños negocios y como yo que tengo un daycare, mi goal es buscar un centro que ya esté trabajando? ¿Eso también ayuda en ellos o solamente es vender nuestro negocio pequeño?
What Rocío is asking is that she has an acre. She wants to see, she has a small business and she wants to know if you guys help them look for a business or this only works for already established businesses.
Let me make sure I'm understanding. Is she asking if we would help her look for a business she's looking to buy?
Yes. Sí, correcto. ¿Verdad, Rocío? Que si estás buscando si hay una empresa que tú quieras comprar.
Yeah, because my goal is to buy like a center, so make my business bigger.
Okay. So we don't necessarily do like placing people who are looking to buy individual businesses, but if you have an existing business and you're hoping to roll more businesses into your business, like I'm not sure exactly what your business is, but let's say you had we'll just go back to the Happy Earth example since we were just talking about them. Let's say you had a cleaning business and your goal was to grow your business by acquiring other businesses that you could then bring into the umbrella of your business, then we don't necessarily help source those, but you could establish an employee-owned business and use a model that we call a roll-up model, which is where as you found those businesses that you were interested in acquiring, you could roll them into your employee-owned business and have that be a way to bring all those businesses together into one larger business. And it's also worth noting, I don't think I talked about this, but you do not have to bring 100% of your business into employee ownership. You can maintain, for example, a controlling share. You could maintain 51% ownership of your business, bring 49% into employee ownership, and that could also be an enticing carrot, so to speak, for when you're going out trying to find those businesses. If you're saying when you bring your business in, you can tell your employees they get these benefits of employee ownership too. That way you could kind of retain that controlling interest, help grow your business, but use the employee ownership benefits as a way to entice and incentivize other businesses you might be interested in acquiring. Does that help? Or is that answer?
¿Eso contestó tu pregunta? Sí. ¿Alguien más tiene alguna otra pregunta? Thank you, Megan. ¿Alguien más? Okay. Well, Megan, thank you so much for this information. This, at least for me, is super, super useful. This opened a new area that I was not aware of, and I work in the financial area. So that's why. Thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to just keep working with you. And I'll make sure that everyone gets a presentation, as well as the other people that sign up and were not able to be here. We'll send it their way as well. Thank you so much, Megan.
Thank you for having me. It was a real pleasure to spend some time with you. Thank you all for your attention. And I look forward to speaking to any of you who have more questions as we move forward. Daniel, thank you so much. Astrid, really appreciate your support on the call tonight as well.
Thank you.
Wonderful night.
Y bueno, preguntas y respuestas. Y con nosotros nomás quiero mencionarles que tenemos la membresía de Asociación de Emprendedores.org, donde tienen diferentes beneficios: contar con su propia plataforma de educación personal y profesional, recibir herramientas que te ayudan a prosperar en tu negocio, talleres exclusivamente en español, aunque este fue en inglés, es el primero que hemos hecho y creemos que es un tema muy relevante. También tener un foro donde te pueda expresar libremente en tu idioma y ser escuchado, eventos a costo moderado. Voluntariado oficial, debe ser miembro activo de nuestra organización, actividades representando a nuestra organización de emprendedores, reuniones de negocios mensuales presenciales en Riverside, San Bernardino, Orange. También tenemos webinars, Dinner and Learn en español mensual, que viene siendo apoyo en la promoción de tu negocio, de tu pequeño negocio, apoyando el incremento de tus ventas, apoyo a completar el documento necesario para el establecimiento de tu microempresa con módica donación. También otro beneficio es plataforma para dar a conocer tus productos y servicios en español y mucho más. El costo de la membresía son $160 por año y anuncios. Y como saben, nosotros participamos en el programa Scale que viene de Carlos VA, que es la agencia de gobierno que apoya a las pequeñas empresas. Y con nosotros, su equipo de finanzas, tanto Jessica Monte en el condado de San Bernardino y yo en el condado de Los Ángeles, nosotros damos diferentes programas. Ahorita va a haber un programa presencial de educación financiera, el cual va a empezar el 25 de septiembre de 5 a 7 en la ciudad de Anaheim. Si se quieren registrar, se pueden ir a asociaciondeemprendedores.org. También va a empezar el programa de emprendedores para residentes del condado de Imperial Valley en California. Inicia el día de mañana, jueves 11 de septiembre, de 5 a 7. De nuevo en la página se pueden registrar, asociaciondeemprendedores.org. Otro programa que va a empezar el día 22 de septiembre es el programa Emprendedores para residentes de Pico Rivera, de nuevo de 5 a 7, donde son los 8 módulos. Y también se pueden registrar en la Asociación de Emprendedores.org. También va a haber un taller virtual financiero en colaboración con JP Morgan Chase el jueves 25 de septiembre de 11:30 a.m. a 1 p.m., en el cual de nuevo se pueden registrar en la Asociación de Emprendedores.org. Y también tenemos el programa Emprendedores Ciudad de Temécula, que inicia el martes 7 de octubre de 5 a 7. Registro abierto a Asociación de Emprendedores.org. Y de nuevo, muchísimas gracias por su participación. Si ya no tienen preguntas, nos vemos en la próxima. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Dani.
Con todo gusto, Blanca.
Muchas gracias, gracias.
Con todo
Gracias,
gusto.
Daniel.
Gracias.
Buenas noches.
Bonita
Buenas
noche.
noches.